I cheated on my reliable boyfriend with someone dangerous and he turned my family against me forever. I met Ethan fresh out of university when we both started at the same advertising agency in Seattle. He was assigned to my project team and honestly my first impression was that he was kind of boring. Not ugly or anything, just very safe. The type of guy who brought his lunch in a brown bag every day and actually read the employee handbook cover to cover. While everyone else was figuring out which happy hours to hit and who was dating whom, Ethan was focused on spreadsheets and meeting deadlines. But I had to admit, working with him was easy. He never tried to take credit for my ideas. Always had his parts of presentations ready early. And when our project manager was being unreasonable, Ethan would quietly handle the extra work without making a big deal about it. He was reliable in a way that I wasn't used to from guys my age. Most of the men I knew were still acting like they were in a fraternity, but Ethan seemed like he actually had his life together. We became friends over those 2 years, grabbing coffee between meetings and complaining about our boss's impossible deadlines. He'd listen to me vent about my dating disasters with this patient expression, never judging, never trying to insert himself into the conversation as a potential option. I appreciated that about him. He felt safe to talk to like a brother or something. When I got the offer from the boutique agency in Portland, Ethan was genuinely happy for me. He took me out for congratulations drinks and told me I deserved the promotion and pay bump. No jealousy, no weird energy, just pure support. That's when I started seeing him differently. Here was this guy who wanted good things for me, even when it meant I'd be leaving him behind. That was pretty rare in my experience. The transition from friends to something more happened naturally after I left the company. Without the workplace dynamic, our coffee meetups started feeling more like dates. Ethan would pick me up from my new office and we'd try different restaurants around the city. He remembered everything I told him. That I hated cilantro, that I wanted to travel to Morocco someday, that my mom's birthday was coming up. The attention felt good after years of dating guys who could barely remember my middle name. When he finally kissed me after about a month of these not dates, it felt right, comfortable, like coming home after a long day. We fell into a routine pretty quickly. He'd stay at my apartment for days at a time or I'd practically move into his place for a week. We never officially moved in together, but we were basically living together without the commitment. Ethan was different from anyone I'd ever been with. He actually cared about meeting my family, and when he did, my mom immediately loved him. He brought flowers, complimented her cooking, and sat through my dad's boring stories about his landscaping business without checking his phone once. My little sister, Emma, now 16, was constantly asking when Ethan was coming around again. He just fit into my life seamlessly. We took trips together. Weekend getaways to the Oregon coast, a long weekend in Denver, a whole week in Costa Rica where he researched all the best local restaurants and made sure we saw the historical sites I'd mentioned wanting to visit. He was thoughtful in ways that should have made me feel lucky. And I did feel lucky most of the time, but there was this other part of me that felt restless. Ethan didn't drink much, didn't like staying out late, and definitely wasn't into the club scene. When I mentioned wanting to go dancing, he'd suggest we take salsa lessons together instead. When I talked about missing the nightlife from college, he'd plan elaborate date nights at home with candles and home-cooked meals. It was sweet, but sometimes I just wanted to get dressed up, drink too much, and dance until my feet hurt. About a year into our relationship, I started going out without him occasionally. Not often, just when I was feeling cooped up, or when my girlfriends from work were hitting the town. I'd tell Ethan I was having a girls' night, which was technically true, and he'd tell me to have fun and text him when I got home safe. He never questioned it, never made me feel guilty. He trusted me completely. Maybe that's what made it so easy to start bending the truth a little. When girls' night turned into mixed groups with guys from other companies, I didn't bother correcting Ethan's assumption that it was just us women. When we ended up at clubs instead of wine bars, I'd just say we had a great time catching up. He'd ask how my friends were doing, and I'd fill him in on their lives while leaving out the parts about dancing with strangers and staying out until 3 a.m. It felt harmless. I wasn't doing anything wrong, just having the kind of fun that Ethan wouldn't understand or appreciate. He was happy thinking I was having quiet dinners with girlfriends, and I was happy getting the excitement I needed. What he didn't know wouldn't hurt him. And it wasn't like I was hooking up with anyone. I was just dancing and feeling young and free for a few hours before going back to our quiet, predictable routine. The club visits became more frequent over the years. I couldn't even count how many times I snuck off for a night of real fun while Ethan stayed home watching documentaries or reading. He never got suspicious, never questioned my stories. Sometimes I felt a little guilty seeing how much he trusted me. But then I'd remind myself that I wasn't actually betraying that trust. I was just living my life. Then came that night about 6 months ago. I'd told Ethan I was meeting some coworkers for dinner to celebrate a client win, which wasn't entirely a lie. We had closed a big deal that week. But instead of the quiet restaurant dinner he was picturing, we ended up at this upscale club downtown. The music was incredible. The drinks were strong. And I was feeling amazing in this new dress I'd bought specifically for nights like these. That's when I met Caleb. He was one of the club promoters. Gorgeous in that dangerous way that Ethan definitely wasn't. Dark skin, perfect smile, and this confidence that just drew people to him. He bought me drinks, pulled me onto the dance floor, and made me feel like the most interesting woman in the room. When's the last time Ethan had looked at me like that? Like I was exciting and mysterious instead of comfortable and familiar. Caleb was everything Ethan wasn't. Spontaneous, a little reckless, fully present in the moment instead of always planning for tomorrow. When he suggested we go back to his place, every rational part of my brain said no. But the part of me that had been feeling suffocated by routine said yes. I deserved this. I deserved to feel wanted and alive and dangerous for once. We hooked up 3 times that night. I didn't leave his place until 6 a.m., barely making it home before Ethan would expect me to be awake. I told him I'd had too much wine at dinner and crashed at my coworker Lily's place to avoid driving. He made me coffee and asked if I had fun. Genuinely interested in my night. The guilt lasted about 5 minutes before I convinced myself that what happened with Caleb was just a moment out of time. It didn't change anything about my relationship with Ethan. It was just something I needed to get out of my system. I never planned to see Caleb again. It was supposed to be one perfect night that would live in my memory while I went back to real life. But apparently Caleb had other plans. I found out later that there was a photographer at the club that night who caught us together in one of those candid shots they take for social media. Caleb got a copy of the photo and started asking around to figure out who I was. When he found out I had a long-term boyfriend, his moral compass kicked in and he decided Ethan deserved to know the truth. I was completely clueless about any of this. I'd gone back to my normal routine with Ethan, maybe feeling a little more appreciative of his steady presence after my night of wildness. We were planning a weekend trip to visit his parents, talking about trying that new Thai restaurant, just normal relationship stuff. I thought I'd gotten away with it cleanly. Then Ethan started acting weird. He'd always been attentive, but suddenly he was watching me more carefully, asking more questions about my plans. When he asked me to come over to his place to talk, I figured he wanted to discuss the trip or maybe some work stress he'd been dealing with. Instead, he sat me down on his couch with this expression I'd never seen before. Calm but cold, like he was conducting a business meeting instead of talking to his girlfriend of 5 years. "When did you last go to the club?" he asked completely out of nowhere. My heart jumped, but I kept my voice steady. "Some weeks ago." "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" I tried to look confused by the question. Nothing bad happened. I just didn't want to deal with you being upset about it. Which was true. He'd always made it clear that he thought excessive partying was immature. How many times have you snuck off without telling me? That one was harder to answer without sounding terrible. I couldn't count how many times, but Ethan, I don't understand why you're interrogating me like this. His jaw was tight and he was staring at me like he was seeing a stranger. Is there anything else I should worry about? Absolutely nothing, I said immediately. I go out, I dance, I come home. That's it. That's when he pulled out his phone and showed me the photo. Me and Caleb, obviously together, obviously more than just dancing. My stomach dropped to the floor, but my mouth was faster than my brain. That's not me. He just stared at me. That's not you. No, it's probably AI from someone who didn't like me. People can fake anything these days. The look on his face told me he wasn't buying it, but I was committed to the story now. How could I explain that it was just one night, that it didn't mean anything when he was looking at photographic evidence that I'd been lying to his face for years? But Ethan had done his homework. He'd already met with Caleb, cross-referenced dates and messages, gotten the whole story. He knew exactly what had happened and when. My denials just made everything worse. We're done, he said, standing up from the couch. I want my stuff back, and I want yours out of my place. Ethan, wait. You're being crazy about this. It was one night. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to me. He said, the lying meant something. The sneaking around for years meant something. The fact that you're still lying to my face right now means something. I wanted to explain that I'd only lied because I knew he wouldn't understand, that I'd been trying to protect his feelings, but he was already done listening. We exchanged belongings like we were strangers and that was it. 5 years over in one conversation. I was angry for weeks. He was acting like I'd committed some unforgivable crime when all I'd done was have a little fun. Sure, maybe I should have been honest about going out, but his controlling attitude about my social life was exactly why I'd felt the need to sneak around in the first place. If he'd been more understanding about me needing space to be young and social, none of this would have happened. I thought the worst of it was over. We'd broken up. We'd both move on. And eventually, this would just be a bad memory. I should have known Ethan wouldn't let it go that easily. For all his quiet nice guy act, he turned out to be vindictive as hell. A few weeks after our breakup, I started getting frantic calls from my family. My mom was crying, asking how I could have done this to such a wonderful man. My sister, Emma, was asking if the photos going around social media were real. My coworkers were looking at me weird and whispering when I walked by. Ethan had posted the club photo along with the whole story to Instagram and Twitter, tagging my handle so everyone would know exactly who he was talking about. He'd sent screenshots to my parents, my siblings, probably anyone who followed both of us on social media. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments calling me everything you could imagine. People sharing it to their own accounts. My personal business spread all over the internet like I was some kind of celebrity scandal. I drove straight to his house in a rage. How dare he air our private business like that? How dare he humiliate me in front of everyone I knew? He could have just broken up with me and moved on like an adult, but instead he had to destroy my reputation like some bitter teenager. When he opened the door, I pushed past him into his living room, poking him in the chest and screaming about what a pathetic, vindictive person he was. You're acting like a woman with these petty bitch-like tactics, I told him. Real men handle their business privately. That's when he grabbed me by the shoulders and physically dragged me toward the door. I'd never seen him be aggressive about anything, but apparently I'd pushed him too far. He told me if I ever showed up at his house again, he'd call the police and get a restraining order. "You did this to yourself," he said before slamming the door in my face. "I just made sure everyone else knew who you really are." That was 6 months ago. The social media posts are still up, still getting comments from people who love drama and want to pile on someone they don't even know. My story is basically immortalized on the internet now. Ethan, now 30, has moved on, apparently planning to stay single and focus on himself, which is probably for the best since he clearly can't handle being with someone who has needs outside of his narrow little world. I've tried to move on, too. But it's hard when everyone in your social circle has seen you get publicly dragged like that. Dating is basically impossible when potential partners can Google your name and find out you're supposedly some terrible cheater. Never mind that the whole thing has been blown completely out of proportion, or that Ethan's reaction was way more extreme than what the situation called for. The worst part is how everyone acts like he's some kind of hero for exposing me. Like he didn't completely violate my privacy and humiliate me in front of everyone I know. Sure, maybe I made some mistakes, but what I did was human and understandable. I was feeling trapped in a relationship that wasn't giving me what I needed, and I acted on that in a moment of weakness. People have affairs all the time. It doesn't make them monsters, but according to the internet, I'm the villain in this story. The evil girlfriend who betrayed the perfect innocent boyfriend. Never mind that his controlling attitude and refusal to understand my need for independence is what created the problem in the first place. Never mind that I was trying to protect his feelings by keeping my social life separate from our relationship. Never mind that it was one night out of 5 years and it didn't even mean anything to me. I just wanted to have some fun and live my life without having to justify every decision to someone who thought a wild night was trying a new flavor of herbal tea. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. And I definitely never meant for my private business to become public entertainment. But apparently wanting to feel young and free and excited makes me the worst person in the world. Ethan got his revenge and then some. He's probably satisfied knowing that he destroyed my reputation and made it impossible for me to move on with my life. Meanwhile, everyone feels sorry for him and thinks he's better off without me. Maybe he is. Maybe we both are. But he didn't have to burn down my entire life to make that point. I still think about that night with Caleb sometimes. Not because I'm in love with him or because I regret being with Ethan, but because it was the last time I felt truly free. The last time someone looked at me like I was exciting and worth pursuing. The last time I got to be myself instead of someone's idea of the perfect girlfriend. Was it worth it? That's the question everyone wants me to answer. Like there's some simple calculation that makes sense of the whole mess. Was one night of feeling alive worth losing 5 years of stability? Was a moment of excitement worth having my reputation destroyed and my family disappointed? I don't know. All I know is that I'm tired of being made out to be some kind of monster for being human. For wanting something more than the safe, predictable life that Ethan had mapped out for us. For making one impulsive decision that hurt someone I cared about, but that everyone acts like was premeditated and evil. The truth is, relationships are complicated. People make mistakes. Sometimes those mistakes have consequences that spiral way beyond what anyone intended. I'm not proud of how things ended, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting more out of life than what I was getting. I'm not going to pretend that Ethan was perfect just because he got his feelings hurt. Maybe someday this will all blow over and people will move on to the next scandal. Maybe I'll meet someone who doesn't care about my past or who understands that there are two sides to every story. Maybe Ethan will realize that his reaction was just as destructive as what I did, if not more so. Or maybe this is just my life now. Being known as the girl who cheated on the nice guy, having that define me forever in the minds of people who don't know anything else about who I am. Either way, I'm done apologizing for wanting to feel alive. I'm done letting other people's judgment make me feel ashamed for being human.